YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So, we've got something for the TRX4 today. We've got a pair of these TR4 HD servos, power HD servos. So, what we're going to be doing is, let's get this magnetic top off. We're going to be swapping out the diff servos, because this one's died altogether, which is not good. I suppose it were only a matter of time. The Traxxas ones aren't the best of servos, but let's get a nice close in one for this one so you can see what I'm actually doing, and we'll get the two diff servos swapped. Right, so first thing we're going to want to do is get the radio tray off. Let's get the receiver cover out, and we're going to have a whole load of fun getting the wires out for these. Right, then, just to make it easier, maybe help you see a little bit more, see if I can get the battery tray removed. Not sure if you actually need to remove this, but it might make it a bit easier to see what we're doing. I think most of the screws are accessible all from the side, but it doesn't really take very long to get the battery tray out. You got a couple of screws at either side and two screws at front. And these screws are just in line with this bit there. So that's one of them out. Let's see if we can get the other. The TRX4s tend to look more complicated than they are to work on. I think once you've stripped them down a bit, the suddenly seems a lot easier. Let's see if I can twist that out. Right, that's got that out way. So let's have a look what else we've got. So we're going to want to remove the servo trays, and you can see this servo, that's just dead. Gears have gone. So we'll remove the servo arms. Get them out of the way. Right, so next thing we're going for is we're going to get these two servos out. So should be able to get just the two screws out on them, and then let's see what else we need to remove. I think the hardest part to doing this is getting the servo plugs out the Traxxas servo tray, because once you've got quite a few wires in here, it's an absolute nightmare. And I know quite a lot of them I've ended up just popping plugs off just to make it easier to get them out. So that's two screws out of each servo. Let's see if they're gonna come free or if we're gonna have to take the entire servo tray out. It doesn't look like anything else is holding them in, but they don't want to budge. Maybe it's just these servo wires running underneath. Yeah, I think it is. So let's have a look what other screws we've got. Well, we've got a screw on the top of each one of these, and then we've got one screw down this side. So let's try removing that. So we got that screw down in the bottom. That still feels pretty much stuck in there. I think there's one in the middle. So we got another screw right down under these wires. See if we can lift that one out. So all 6 screws so far in the servos and holding the servo tray down, all the same size. Let's get these clipped off, just to make it easier. That just loosens them wires up a bit. So that's a servo tray lifted out now. Let's have a look what's holding these servos in. Not an awful lot by the looks of it. So it looks like the servo wires for these are fed. What the hell have they done with them? So they're actually fed through from the bottom and then tucked round and brought back through top. I don't see why you've done that, Traxxas. That's just a pain in backside. Right, let's follow these wires and see which ones we can get out, and then we should be able to remove servos. So get these servo plugs out. So if you just lift the tabs up, you can then just pull the wires out. And on a TRX 4 or 6, it makes it a lot easier to get these cables through. Let's try and get this servo wire out. Right, so then you've got to feed the servo wire back up through here. And then we've got to take it back down through. So that's then got to come back down, and then we can get a servo out. Or we should be able to get a servo out. Yeah, there we go. Not sure what that little thing is on these servos. Don't know if it's a resistor block or a choke. But one horrible Traxxas servo removed. And with the TR4 servos. Got a nice long servo cable, and you can see they're all metal geared in these. And you do get a couple of little servo arms and a servo arm screw, should I say. Now, while we've got all this to bits, let's see if we can have a quick clean around. Clean out some areas that we can't get to normally. Right, so both these servos sit with the servo arms facing inwards. So first thing we need to do is thread the servo cable through. So you want to send that down to the bottom. And you want to spin the servo around to the same orientation as what it was in. Let's see if it's even possible to feed these cables back in the same way. I don't think it's going to be, looking at it. There's really very little room under there. So then all we need to do is get this lovely servo cable back round to where the other ones are. In fact, let's see if we can just move that one around a little bit, and we might be able to get this servo cable back up. There's not a lot of room in here at all. So we're basically trying to get that servo up, the servo socket up through the same hole as where TRX has had it. But there's really not a lot of room under here. It looks like it's barely big enough to get a servo plug through. But looks like it can be done. Just there is a slot in the front of it, but I'm not sure. Try it on the next one, but I think you can kind of push the cable up through the front and then round, but we'll try that on the next one. So you want to bring your servo cable around, and then we've got the lovely job of getting it back through into a Traxxas receiver box. Always easier said than done. Let's see if I can pop the receiver up a bit. I might be able to. You don't want to pull this too tight, because you've got to get them servos back into position. So that's going to be one servo done. Right, let's see if we can find out which wire it is from this other one. So looks like that's the cable. but which one is it coming through here? Looks like that's it. Is it that one? Yep. So that's going to be his next servo we're removing. Or trying to. Right, and then again, we've got to get this cable out. See if that'll come out up front. There's not a deal of room whichever way you go, but that can come out. So that's a dead Traxxas servo, so let's get another TR4. So again, we want to go down through the servo tray. Be careful not to pinch your servo wire on anything. So both the servo arms towards the centre, and then we got to try and get this through. Now let's see if it's any easier putting it through the front and then putting the wire through the slot. Yeah, looks like that's a little bit better. Not an awful lot because now the wire's twisted. You don't want to be twisting it too much back on itself. But should bring it through. Right. And same again, you want to thread it around all your other cables, and if you're like me with lights and all sorts on your TR4, TRX4 or 6, you'll have a billion wires coming into this receiver box, which does not make this part any easier. Now if you're pushing these servo sockets through, just be careful that you don't cut your wires. So we just need to get the servos all plugged in. And then you can sit your receiver back down. Right, next thing I'm going to do, make sure none of his wires are trapped. Looks like we've got one of the servo wires trying to get under this bit. So now we can get two of the screws back in that hold our servo tray. And then you want to remount the screws that hold the servo down. I wouldn't go crazy tight on these because they're only plastic threads and plastic servos, and they're quite small servos. So get all four of those back in. We don't want to be over tightening them. And just double check the servo trays fastened in correctly. That is a whole lot of servo wire. It's a good job there's a fair bit of space in this servo box. So they'll tidy up when we're done. Right, first thing I would suggest doing is you want to power up your TRX. And then power up your control.
Welcome to Noble.
Right, let's see if I can get you an idea of what we're going to be doing next. That's going to stream at me because the DVB voltage is unplugged. Let's try and shut that up. So we can try both the servos, make sure they're working. Now, what you want to do, so this one we've got set up to channel 4. So basically, what I'm going to do is come into the end point of channel 4. And I'm going to turn it right down. I'm going to drop them all the way down to, let's see, in fact I'm going to take it down further. I'm going to take it all the way down to 10. In each direction, simply because the last thing you want to do is put a new servo on it and then end up with your servo arm stripped. So now we're going to want to rebuild a servo on. So that's going to be moved towards the locked position, and that's going to be open. So let's have a look how far that pushes in. So that's going to be all the way in. I'm just going to move it back a little bit. So that's going to be us in position. So let's just move it out a tiny little bit from there, just to give us some movement to play with. All the way in, all the way out. Still want a bit more. Let's try on that position. Right, so now we can move it to that position, and then all we're going to want to do now is add travel. Now you want it moving enough to lock, but you don't want it moving too far, so it's going to be forcing the servo. See if we can get that somewhere where it's going to keep quiet. So let's have a look what we've got here. So that should be unlocked. That's locked. And it doesn't sound like the servo's trying to force at any point. That's what we're looking for. You don't want that cable to be pulling, and it doesn't want to be forcing when it gets to the other side. Just wants to be enough to actuate the diff locks itself, but you're far better to have this so it's not pulling. You don't want it overstressing these little micro servos, and they really don't need to move that far to activate the diffs either. So once we've got the servo unscrewed down, we can try it. Make sure. Now what you can do is you can keep backing it off until the diff starts to actuate, and then you can tell exactly just how far you can get away with moving it until it locks. So let's see how far that one needs to go. It's not really that far. But you don't want to, you want to be listening at it, you don't want the servo to be straining at all. So let's move on to the front one. So again, let's back them right down to about 10. With small servos it is so easy to just strip a thread on them or strip one at gears. It's just far easier to start at a really low end point. So that's going to be all the way out, so we can move it back. Let's look for its nearest servo point. So we're now going to set the travel this way. I really should have turned the alarm off on this. Right. See, let's make sure this front diff's working. Yeah. So we're looking for an actuation point quite far out on that one. So we should be pretty close at that, and neither of the two little micros are struggling. So let's have a look how we're faring. So that's front disabled, front enabled. And we've got rear enabled, rear disabled. So as you see, they don't have to move that far. You just don't want the cables to be straining. So let's get it powered off now.
Signal lost. Shutting
So you want to try and push these cables down, because you don't want them running on the micros at all, on the diff locks. You don't want them catching. You can pull some of the excess wire through. Might cable tie them in a bit. And then you just want to scrunch all them cables up. You can get a cable tie on them, but if you do put a cable tie on them, if you ever come to take any of this out, you've got to cut the cable ties off again. Now, the only other thing I would tell you to be careful of is if any of the cables come near the side of this waterproof covering, you don't want to trap them, especially if you're running the thin DVB cable on the Flysky receiver like I am on this one. So that's got his servos on, and then we need to get our battery tray back down, so just make sure nothing is in the way around here. Now, if you line these two holes up, it'll make it a lot easier to get these two back screws in. And they just want to go underneath. And then we've got these two. And then the final one, and this is going to be a nightmare to try and find from this side. No, I give up, I'm going to have to flip it. There we go, that's the last one. So, fully swapped out servos. We now have two TR4 servos, and it's been a long enough video as it is. I'm probably going to do another video swapping the final one out at a later date, and then I'll even look at turning the BEC up from 6 volt to 7.4 volt, because these can run 7.4, the servo can, and the Flysky radio gear is capable of about 8.4 or 9 volt, I think, that one. Right, let's get to conclusion. Right, so there we have it. TR4 servos in the TRX4. Not a particularly difficult job, just a little bit awkward getting these servo wires through. And you've just got to be careful when you're setting the endpoints on these. Let's see. The things that you don't want to do. You don't want to put the servo one on first and leave the endpoints set on 100%. I really ought to turn that alarm off. But so basically, when you're setting the servos up originally, you don't want to be setting the endpoints up at 100%, because if you're gonna basically overforce these servos, yes, they are a lot better than Traxxas ones, but especially if you're running these uprated servo horns, there's definitely more tendency to put a lot more stress on your micro servos, and you really don't want to be doing that. It's one of the main things that does burn out the micros. And you can have a quick look once you've adjusted it, just to make sure that nothing's overly stressing them. You can tell with just how much they have to bend the actual towers. So you can tell if they're really bending on them towers, then there's a good chance that you've got it travelling too far. And you just don't want them going to the point where they're going to basically burn out your new servos. And you can just keep playing around with them until you get it to the point where it's actuating properly. And then you know that you don't need to have the servo travelling any further. But hopefully you find this useful, easier to follow. Tried my best with top-down view, but you'll have to let me know. It's been quite a long video, this one, so thanks for sticking with me. So if you like and subscribe, don't forget to hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and I'll catch you guys again in the next one.